Have you ever thought about those old legends, lost cities brimming with treasure, and then maybe wondered if there's ever a real world version, like in Atlantis, that actually existed? Well, there kind of was. Picture a city, Port Royal in Jamaica, once called the wickedest place on earth, seriously wealthy, crawling with pirates, and then boom, almost wiped off the map, swallowed by the sea in basically an instant. It's an incredible, true story, not myth at all. So that's our mission today. We're doing a deep dive into how Port Royal shot up, became this infamous hub, and then crashed, literally. We'll get into the geology, the science behind why it sank, and then look at how underwater archaeology is piecing it all back together today, shaping this ghostly heritage it has now. Our aim is to give you the shortcut, the essential info on this amazing story, maybe with a few surprises along the way. So where do we start with a place like Port Royal? Its origins. Okay, so the story really kicks off way back in 1494. The Spanish founded a place called Cogway. But the Port Royal, we know, the legendary one, that chapter starts in 1655. The English captured it, renamed it Port Royal eventually, and wow, did it take off. By the late 1600s, it wasn't just a city, it was the largest, richest city in the whole Caribbean, a massive center for shipping, trade, and, let's be honest, a fair bit of chaos. It was even Jamaica's unofficial capital for a while. Shows you how important it became fast. But what really made its name, its notorious reputation, was becoming this haven for privateers. Pirates, essentially. Right. And you have to ask, why there? Why Port Royal? Several key reasons. Location, right? It was super close to the rich Spanish trade routes, easy pickings, plus it was near these vital, safe passages into the that's the Spanish territories on the mainland coast coming from the Atlantic. The harbor itself, huge, loads of space for ships, and the water was shallow near the shore, perfect for careening. Careening, yeah, that's where they deliberately tilt the ships over, often on a beach, to scrape the hulls clean, do repairs below the waterline, vital stuff for ships back then. So it was just the ideal spot to launch raids from. We're talking big names using it as a base. Christopher Mings, the legendary Henry Morgan, he hit Panama, Portobello, Maracaibo, and others too, right? Like Rooster Braziliano, John Davis, Answell. Yeah, they were all operating out of Port Royal.
And it's really important to grasp this idea of forced trade that popped up. This wasn't just random piracy, like you might imagine. It was actually quite well organized. You had English merchants funding what looked like legitimate trading tricks to Spanish areas. But at the same time, they were bankrolling privateers to attack Spanish ships and towns. It was this weird mix.
A kind of blurred line between business and plunder.
Exactly. As one historian put it, the city's fortune was founded entirely on the servicing of the privateers' needs and highly lucrative trade in prized commodities. It basically built an economy around piracy, disguised or not. And the scale was just immense. Think about Henry Morgan's Portobello raid in 1668.
How much did that bring in?
Reports say 75,000 pounds. That is more than 7 times what Jamaica made from sugar exports in a whole year back then.
Wow, 7 times the sugar trade.
Yeah. So you can see why it was so appealing despite the risks. And with that kind of cash flooding in, actual coins became the way to pay, not just bartering, which was more common elsewhere.
So this systematic, almost business-like approach to piracy fueled this wild reputation. What was life actually like there? What did people say about it?
Oh, the reputation was definitely earned. People called it the Sodom of the New World, or just the wickedest city on earth. The stories are pretty wild. You hear about pirates dropping like 2,000 or 3,000 pieces of 8 in a single night out, just burning through cash.
That's an insane amount of money for the time.
Absolutely. There's one story of a pirate paying a woman 500 pieces of 8 just to see her naked.
Seriously.
That's the account. And apparently they'd sometimes buy a whole barrel, a pipe of wine, stick it in the street, and just make everyone who walked past have a drink.
Public intoxication basically required.
Pretty much. And apparently even the parrots got in on it. One explorer wrote about the parrots in Port Royal drinking ale, just like the human drunks.
Parrots drinking ale. Okay, that paints a picture. And it was crowded too, right? Yeah, incredibly dense. Before the earthquake in 1692, something like 10,000 people lived there. And get this, 2,000 buildings crammed into just 51 acres.
That is dense.
Pure, concentrated everything, including vice. They figured there was one drinking house for every 10 residents.
1 for every 10.
Yep. And in just 1 month, July 1661, they issued 40 new tavern licenses. But it wasn't just taverns and pirates. You had goldsmiths, 4 of them, artisans, merchants, 44 tavern keepers listed. Everyone trying to cash in. A real, thriving, if slightly unhinged city.
But things did start to change. Henry Morgan, the famous privateer, actually became lieutenant governor.
The pirate became the governor.
Sort of, yeah. And as the English colony got more established, they needed the pirates less for defense. Other things, like the horrific trade in enslaved people, became more economically central. You also had more respectable citizens perhaps getting tired of the chaos of the reputation. So change started happening.
What kind of change?
Well, in 1687, Jamaica passed anti-piracy laws. Suddenly, Port Royal went from being a pirate haven to a place where pirates were executed.
Quite the turnaround.
A major one. Gallows Point became infamous. Guys like Charles Vane, John Rackham Calico Jack, they were hanged there in 1720. Mary Read, the famous female pirate, died in prison there. At one point, things got so intense that 41 pirates were executed in just 1 month a couple of years later. The Royal Navy also started building up its presence, setting up facilities. It was a definite shift away from the wild buccaneer days.
So this incredibly vibrant, packed city, built on shaky ground, it sounds like, literally. You can almost feel something bad coming.
You really can. And the way it was built didn't help. That rapid growth meant building fast, often on land that was basically just filled in swamp or harbor edge.
Yeah.
And the English settlers, well, they brought their building style with them. Heavy, multi-story brick houses, like back in England.
Instead of
the lower, lighter wooden buildings the Spanish had used, which were probably better suited to the area. There were warnings, apparently, but they were largely ignored.
a fatal mistake, then.
Absolutely, because on June 7th, 1692, it happened. Just before noon, 11:43 a.m., to be exact, we know this from a pocket watch found in the debris, stopped at that very moment.
An earthquake.
A massive earthquake hit Jamaica. But for Port Royal, the disaster was magnified by something called liquefaction.
A liquefaction.
Yeah, the city was built on about 65 feet of sand, completely saturated with water. The water table was only a couple of feet down. So when the earthquake shook everything violently, that waterlogged sand basically lost all its strength. It turned into this thick, unstable sludge, almost like quicksand.
Oh, wow. So the buildings didn't just crumble.
They sank, or slid. The ground itself just gave way beneath them. Large parts of the city simply slipped down into the harbor or disappeared under the liquefied sand.
The scale of the destruction must have been instantaneous, terrifying, utterly devastating. The whole northern part of the city, gone. Maybe 2/3 of all the buildings vanished into the sea in minutes. Imagine seeing solid ground turn to liquid, watching buildings just sink. The forts, Fort James, Fort Carlisle, they sank too. Fort Rupert became, as one account said, a large region of water.
Morgan's Line, a defensive wall, was wrecked. Fort Charles did survive somehow.
But the human cost, immense. Estimates range from 1,000 to 3,000 people killed instantly.
Yeah.
Crushed by buildings, drowned by the tsunami wave that followed the quake, nearly half the population gone in moments. And it didn't end there, did it? The aftermath sounds horrific.
No, the immediate shock was just the beginning. Disease spread like wildfire afterwards. Malignant fevers, they called them. You had thousands of unburied bodies, no proper housing, no clean water, hardly any medicine. It was a perfect storm for epidemics.
How many died from disease?
Estimates suggest another 2,000 people died in the months following the earthquake because of those conditions. Terrible slow-motion continuation of the disaster.
Yeah.
Really underscores the human tragedy. It really does. And connecting that back, Port Royal just seemed cursed after that. It couldn't recover. There was a big fire in 1703 that destroyed much of what was left. Then hurricane after hurricane hammered it. Another fire in 1750. Another massive hurricane in 1774.
Just relentless.
Completely. And even much later, in 1850, a severe cholera epidemic hit. All of this meant that nearby Kingston gradually took over, becoming the main port and eventually the capital of Jamaica. Port Royal never regained its status.
So jumping forward to more recent times, Port Royal gets this new, slightly morbid nickname among archaeologists, right? The city that sank.
Exactly. And that leads us to probably the most fascinating part of its modern story, the underwater archaeology. It's become this incredibly important site. Texas A&M University's nautical archaeology program did a huge study there, starting back in 1981, lasted about 10 years.
Why is it so significant, archaeologically speaking?
Because the part of the city that slid into the sea wasn't completely obliterated, it was submerged quickly. And crucially, the conditions underwater, very low oxygen, meant that organic materials were preserved incredibly well.
Like wood, leather.
Exactly. Wooden buildings, furniture, tools, personal items, things that would normally rot away. It's like a time capsule of 17th century life in a colonial port. It gives archaeologists an unparalleled, detailed look at everyday life back then. It was even featured on National Geographic, which really highlighted its importance.
It's amazing that so much survived beneath the waves, yet the town itself today, it's quite different, very different. Despite this incredible history buried just offshore, the modern town of Port Royal is, well, a shadow of its past. Fewer than 2,000 people live there. It doesn't have much commercial or political clout anymore, and parts of it are often described as being in disrepair. It's a real contrast.
Which naturally leads to the question of what next? How do you manage this incredibly valuable heritage? There have been big plans. Back around 1999-2000, a big master plan was developed by the Dirty Partnership. The goal was ambitious: transform Port Royal into a major heritage tourism destination.
What kind of things did they propose?
Things like a whole 17th century themed experience, a modern cruise ship pier, rebuilding historic areas like Fisher's Row with cafes and shops, even redeveloping the old naval dockyard with a shipbuilding museum, maybe an underwater aquarium showing the sunken city, perhaps even high-end hotels. Restoring the old naval hospital for a museum was also part of it. Big ideas.
Have any of those ideas come to fruition? Well, some progress has definitely been made. A floating cruise pier was built, and the first cruise ship actually docked there in January 2020. That was a big step. Bringing tourists in is obviously helpful for the local economy, but everyone acknowledges there's still, much work to be done. There's also this ongoing initiative called the Living Heritage Program. The aim there is to make Port Royal a smart community, safe, secure, with a decent local economy, while preserving the heritage and protecting the environment. It's a balancing act, and it's ongoing.
And perhaps the most significant recent development, really solidifying its importance on the world stage, was its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2025.
UNESCO status. That's huge.
It really is. It's not just a label. It brings global recognition, can help unlock funding for preservation, encourages sustainable tourism. It basically ensures that this unique underwater city gets the long-term attention and protection it deserves. It's a major boost for preserving that legacy.
So we've traced this wild arc. From the wickedest city, built on pirate gold, to utter devastation in minutes, and now the slow reemergence recognized by UNESCO. It's quite a story. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About ambition, about fortune, but also about how quickly things can change, how vulnerable even a bustling city can be to the power of nature. And it leaves you wondering, what else is down there? What other secrets does Port Royal hold? And how will this ghostly heritage continue to shape its future? It's a reminder that history is often just beneath the surface, waiting. Definitely something to ponder. Keep exploring those hidden stories, folks. There's always more to discover.